Very well. We'll get our meeting going. Thanks everyone for being here. This is the joint meeting for the Planning and Land Use Committees for San Pedro, and we have members from the Northwest Council, the Coastal, and Central. Diana Nave here is from Northwest, myself from Central, and I don't see anybody from Coastal yet.
We got a couple of people from Coastal.
Adele.
At least
There's four of us here.
You got four
Okay.
people from Coastal,
Oh, that's right. I forgot you guys are.
and you have a hand up.
Somebody, Doug,
And I
That was
haven't
a
made you a
wave.
co-host,
That was a
sorry.
wave.
can you do that, Diana?
Yeah, it's Doug.
Yeah.
Hey, Doug.
Hello, I was just wondering, are you going to promote me to panelist this time?
Yes, we did.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet.
You're there.
No, he's not.
No, I'm
I
not.
see him on the screen.
I know I'm having trouble.
Let me see.
There we go.
I just did. Very well. Well, thanks everyone for being here. We're going to get started with our meeting, and our first item on the agenda is the zoning code update on the process by Elisa Gordon from LA City Planning, and she's here to join us. Yes.
Javier, if you will, there's several names I don't recognize. I'm wondering if there's anybody on who is a student and needing credit. If so, please raise your hand so we can make sure you get the credit. Okay, thank you, Javier. Just need to make sure we
All right.
did that.
Thank you. Elisa, thank you for being here. Welcome, and you're able to go ahead. You're muted. I don't know why I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? I'm not muted now. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Barely.
Very low volume.
I can try putting on these. How is it now?
Oh, perfect.
Oh, great. Excellent.
I've given you screen sharing privileges.
Okay, let's okay, here we go. Okay, can you see in the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you. So good evening, members of the San Pedro Neighborhood Council Land Use Committees. My name is Elisa Gordon. I'm a city planner with Los Angeles City Planning, and I'm joined this evening by South Harbor Community Planning Manager Ruben Caldwell. We also have planners from our zoning integration program in attendance this evening. So the presentation is focused on the new zoning and intended to provide an introduction with highlights and examples of some of the new features or zoning tools that are built into the new code. The new zoning system is efficient, but also complex, and you may have many questions at the end of the meeting. So if we aren't able to get to them, please do feel free to follow up with me as we are limited in time today. I'm also available to return to this forum to provide more information as the project progresses and we begin sharing our zones. Towards the end of the presentation, I'll be providing an update to the project and timeline. So I'd like to just take a moment to briefly review the components of the San Pedro Community Plan, which was adopted in 2017. The plan shapes the future growth of San Pedro with a 20-year horizon. It includes a community plan document which outlines land use goals, policies, and programs. It also established the land use map for San Pedro and the zoning as well. So the San Pedro Community Plan Implementation Overlay District, or CPIO, was a key part of this plan update. It's the zoning tool that implements the community plan by providing specific development standards for downtown San Pedro, many of the commercial corridors in San Pedro, the multifamily residential neighborhood surrounding the downtown area, and the industrial areas as well as shown on the map on the right. So as part of the zoning code update project, new zoning is being developed that is within today's zoning parameters established by the community plan. The proposed new zoning works within the new code structure and includes enhancements made available by the new code. The zoning exercise includes the folding in of the CPIO district plan regulations into the relevant portions of the zone string for those subareas. We will also be utilizing the city's new set of general plan land use designations that accompany the new code. Finally, there will be changes to the community plan document to account for changes in zoning and land use. In the next series of slides, I'll be providing an introduction to the new code with some highlights that show some of the enhancements that are provided by our new zoning system. So today's zoning is housed in a huge complicated code. It's grown over the years from a small pamphlet to an enormous binder, and it's not always very clear what the rules are or where to find them. Often development regulations are found in ordinances or district plans that live outside of that code document. So the planning department has taken on a comprehensive update of our current zoning code and into a web-based and more functional document where all regulations would be located in one place. The new zoning code is arranged in 14 articles. Each of these articles can be found on our city planning website. Articles 2 through 6 represent the key components of the new zoning code zone string. Each article contains a set of regulations that apply to a certain aspect of development. So the San Pedro zoning code update, along with other plan updates in the city, are implementing the new code in their respective plan areas, but they can also introduce new districts to add to the code. We're currently working on developing the appropriate districts and zoning tools for San Pedro, and those will be added to the relevant articles of the city's new code. So as you can see, the articles from the previous slide collectively form a zone string. The additional module on the right is an overlay, which would apply in certain circumstances as a supplemental district. One example would be a historic preservation overlay zone. So the complete zone string would be mapped and applied to every property. The different modules address different facets of how property can be used and developed. Form, frontage, and development standard districts regulate the built environment. Use and density determine the type of activity allowed on a site. One of the goals of the new code was to develop a system that could handle the complexity of today's zoning needs, but in a way that's more transparent and easier to navigate and understand. The new zoning code shown here is made up of letters and numbers. Those refer to specific sets of regulations that are detailed in code pages. The modular combination of different zoning districts allows for more tailored zoning solutions that can ultimately meet a wider range of planning objectives. They also include the important regulations of our existing code. So we'll start with Article 2, form districts. This is the first component of our new modular zone string. So form is intended to regulate the placement, scale, and intensity of buildings and structures on a lot. This can ensure that buildings are compatible with their context. So form districts establish the shape or massing of a building or structure. They can determine how wide and tall buildings can be. They also determine the FAR and height, which are in the existing code. And new features regulated in form districts include width and building breaks. So I have an example highlighted here, building width, which in the new code can range from narrow, medium, broad to full. In the photo to the right, the property is actually built out at a narrow building width, but a typical maximum building width we may find in a commercial district would be under the medium category. In this case, the example shows a maximum of 160 feet. So the example regulation imposes a maximum width requirement and would require a building break when buildings are wider than that specified number. So requiring the breaking up of large buildings is a new feature provided by form. Another feature under form that I would just like to highlight is building lot coverage. Lot coverage is actually a feature that exists in our current code. It applies in single family zones today, including R1 and R1 variation zones. Lot coverage is being more widely applied in the new code to extend beyond single family zones. When we limit lot coverage, we are preserving open area and guiding the character of the built environment. In some cases, such as a commercial context, a high degree of build out may be desired, while in residential settings, we may want to require a degree of open area. The example shown in the photo is an aerial of a single family home. In this example regulation, building coverage in a single family setting is set at 45%, which is in line with regulations on the books today. So moving on to Article 3, which is frontage. Frontage regulates the portions of a lot and exterior building facades that impact the public realm. Districts range from minimal standards for warehouse frontages to a more robust set of standards for what we call shop front frontages, which require projects to support a high quality public realm. Frontage districts influence how buildings appear from the primary street level, their proximity to the streets, and to their ground floor height. They regulate how the public interacts with buildings primarily at the ground level. One of those features is ground floor height. Ground story height requires a minimum of height of all ground floor levels to provide accommodating space for commercial ground floor activities. They ensure that buildings are more accessible from the sidewalk, creating a more active and engaging street experience. In this example regulation, ground story height is set at a minimum of 14 feet along the primary street. This is an existing regulation from the San Pedro CPIO district and would be carried into the new zoning within a frontage district. Another way in which frontage districts influence the way buildings appear from the street is that it can set a percentage minimum for transparency, which involves regulating windows and doors. When we require a high degree of transparency, we are promoting a legible street wall with an activated ground floor, providing pedestrians with visual interest and increased connections between interior uses and the public realm. Requiring transparency based on percentage and the citing of entrance locations are new features of the zoning code. Those regulations today exist within overlays such as a CPIO or CDO. The example portrayed here are sample requirements from a shop frontage that would be located in a commercial district. This regulation requires a street-facing entrance and ground story transparency at around 60 to 70%, with upper story transparency at around 30%. Article 4 of the new code is development standards. The intent of Article 4 is to regulate site design. Development standard districts contain a combination of regulations that are appropriate to a variety of contexts, from auto-oriented to pedestrian-oriented. Development standard districts regulate certain design elements around the building, including those related to access, parking, landscaping, and signs. Depicted here is a photo of a pole sign from the previous slide. Under development standards, we have the option of selecting an auto-oriented or pedestrian-oriented sign package, which would dictate the permission level of a given sign. So under sign package 1, a pole sign would be allowed, but under sign package 2, which is the more pedestrian-oriented sign package, it would be prohibited. So this is an example of a regulation that has traditionally appeared in a site-specific ordinance or in an overlay such as a CPIO or CDO. With development standard sign packages, we can shape the urban environment by choosing a pedestrian or auto-oriented sign package in a given area. So development standards contain districts that prioritize the pedestrian experience. These districts intend to improve pedestrian access from the public realm to the interior of buildings through frequent, direct, and convenient access. Development standards districts have options for screening to mitigate negative impacts from uses or activities. They can conceal activities, but also provide visual interest and increase the comfort for pedestrians at the public realm. So my second example for standards portrays site access. The sample regulation is that pedestrian access ways must be direct. A requirement for a direct access way from a street-facing entrance is intended to ensure buildings are highly integrated with the public realm and promote walking as a convenient mobility option. Next is Article 5. Use is a critical component of the new zoning code as it dictates what activities are permitted on a property. Use districts can determine if uses are allowed by right, conditionally, or prohibited. Use districts outline the types of activities and uses that can occur within a building and/or site, and often include operating standards or regulations for certain uses. They also indicate whether a use requires discretionary approval, such as a conditional use permit. Here I have a snapshot of a general residential use district, which emphasizes residential uses and only allows a minimal amount of compatible uses. So this district permits a dwelling unit and also additionally family, childcare, and home occupation are permitted, but additional use standards apply. So an example of a use standard is limits on hours of operation or client visits per hour. The double dash next to live work indicates that the use is not permitted in this district. The final component of the new zoning code zone string is Article 6, density. Density districts determine the number of housing units permitted on a site. In residential areas, there will be 1 unit per lot for single family and 2 unit per lot for a 2-family dwelling unit zone. The sampling of lot area densities on the left are common densities that exist within our current zoning code. Additionally, we have a density district of N, not permitted when residential densities are not allowed, such as within an industrial zone. So the planning department recently released informational videos on the key articles of the new zoning code that are available to watch online. There is a video for each component of the zone string. I would like to invite you to spend a few minutes to review these helpful 1 to 2 minute videos, which are housed in our department's YouTube page and are hyperlinked if you have a copy of this presentation. So moving into our project update portion, zoning development is well underway for the San Pedro CPIO district. The next phase is going to be focused on working on the standard zones in the coming months. So once the zoning that is our form, frontage, development standards, use, and density have been determined, they'll be formatted for public review and posted to our project website. We also have an updated project process timeline. We have scheduled public release of drafts for this year in 2023. We are projecting to begin rolling out our zoning in the coming months in spring. I'd like to return to this forum at that time to share progress and review concepts with all of you. And finally, it brings me to my last slide. So please do feel free to contact me with any questions that you may have on the project. Also, please sign up for email updates if you haven't already on our contact page of the San Pedro Zoning Code Update Project website. And thank you very much for the opportunity to provide this briefing. I welcome any questions that you may have at this time. And I also just once again, I'll mention that I have some staff from the planning department in attendance. South Harbor Section Manager Ruben Caldwell, and also planners from our zoning team at the Department of City Planning to assist with any zoning specific technical questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And we'll open it up for questions, if anybody has any. Diana,
Yeah, I don't know if
see
this
your
is,
hand.
I don't know if this is a question or a comment. I noticed in the Harbor City Wilmington one that there was a historical, I want to say a historical district, not the same as historical buildings that have to, but some kind of a historical district. And I'm hoping that in San Pedro for our downtown area, we can discuss some kind of a similar designation.
So I know San Pedro has the Vinegar Hill HPOC. So are you talking about something in addition?
Yeah, I'm talking about the commercial area downtown. the
Commercial
downtown
area?
commercial area.
Are there any specific streets that you have in mind?
Primarily 6th and 7th. And what would that be? Pacific to what? Someone tell me what the other end would be. Palos Verdes
How about center?
Center. Maybe
You want to
Palos
go, down to Harbor Boulevard?
Well, yeah, well, I think what if we come up with it, we can then review it and go back and say, oh, no, that's too far, you know, if that's the case.
Are
Very good.
there, Mhm. Are there any specific features that you're looking to preserve?
It's the historical look and feel of the building. It's the frontage of most of the buildings.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a variety of, there's a little bit of Art Deco, but there's also, 100-year-old buildings and live work for artists. And there's a variety of vintage buildings that are very popular with filming, actually, because of the look.
Let's see, Noel had a comment or question.
Oh, thanks, Javier, and thanks, Alyssa, for giving the presentation. Appreciate it. You mentioned something they carried over from the CPIO and the San Pedro Community Plan. It's a 14-foot ground floor requirement for commercial. And I'm wondering if you're in this new zoning code, is that also for residential, or was that just for commercial to give more space for commercial activities?
So that only applies to commercial within the CPIO district area.
Okay, because we have some projects that are 100% residential that were using that 14-foot ground floor requirement, even though it was supposed to be for commercial only. So, yeah. So it's good to know that it's not supposed to be. What's the height limit for the ground floor when it's 100% residential? What's that supposed to be?
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the commercial sub area. The San Pedro CPIO commercial sub area would have
Yeah, I know.
the 14 foot.
Yeah, but that's for commercial uses, right? For like, restaurants or stores or shops or that kind of thing, right?
I mean, I would have to verify in the CPIO whether, I believe it would be for any building.
So for residential as well as commercial now?
I believe so, but I would have to verify in the CPIO district.
Okay. I'm so sorry that I was a few minutes late for your presentation because I was getting off another Zoom. I'm wondering, is there anywhere in the new zoning code where you define scale? Because it seems as though you've defined a lot of things and talked about different kinds of size and FAR and stuff. Is there any place in the new code where scale is defined?
So for that question, I might want to ask one of my colleagues for assistance. I wonder if we can expand the panelists.
Sure, just
Who
tell
would that
me
be?
who do you want to promote?
I mean, it would be great if we could promote my manager, Ruben Caldwell, and Alex Heath as well from our zoning integration program.
Yep.
Thank you.
In fact, Alex had his hand up.
Yeah, that question is scale defined anywhere in the new code? And then after that, I just had one more comment and then I'll be done.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, scale is kind of a generic term. We don't really define that. It is part of our naming convention for our form districts, but that's kind of a little more in the weeds. I think when we're talking about scale, we're generally referring to number of stories, the FAR, floor area ratio, building heights in feet.
So kind of size, sort of.
Yeah, so I think we would probably generally say like large scale is anything over 4 or 5 stories. Low scale is 1 to 2 stories.
So wouldn't be unreasonable to say that scale kind of is related to size.
Yeah, size. So I think we would probably directly refer to scale as the height of the building and the width of the building and also building coverage.
Okay, so height,
Yeah.
width, and coverage.
Mhm.
And so obviously those all pertain to overall size. Okay, great. That's
Mhm.
awesome. All right, and then my final comment, and I'm only bringing it up because it stings so badly. You made it a very specific point of showing the example where certain projects would not be allowed, and you gave the example of residential in an industrial zone. That's why it had the 2 dashes. But of course, we're all painfully familiar with the Seabreeze project, which was over 300 residential units that got spot zoned into the middle of an industrial zone. So I am wondering if there is anything in this new zoning code that would prevent that from happening in the future.
I can answer that question on a generic basis. We do have use districts that prohibit residential and prioritize industrial uses. We also have use districts that allow a certain degree of residential to be mixed with industrial uses, sort of like in a live work format or adaptive reuse format. It all depends on where those are applied and how they're applied. So if the desire is to completely prohibit residential uses, we have a whole set of use districts that do that. If the idea is to limit residential uses in an industrial context or like a live work context, we also have use districts that do that. So we provide the toolkit. It's really up to the community plan and the CPO to apply that where appropriate.
And that'll be shown on maps where those different districts are and stuff.
Right.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Let's see, we have Robin and then Doug.
Hi, and thank you for this outreach. I'm Robin Rudisill, Coastal San Pedro Neighborhood Council Land Use Chair. And as you probably know, the coastal zone of San Pedro does not have an LCP. And I'm wondering when that happens, will there be a part of the zoning code dedicated to the zoning part of that LCP, the implementation plan? And then part 2 of my question is, so for now, all we have is the specific plan, Coastal San Pedro specific plan. Will that be found within the code, or is that going to be just kept as a separate document like it is now?
So as far as the latter half of your question, so we're not planning to, propose an LCP for today. So we are planning to keep the San Pedro specific plan, on the books and not make any changes until the city's ready to do a full local coastal program for this area. As far as the first part of your question, I may ask Alex for a little assistance here, since he's been working for creating some of the zones for the Venice local coastal program.
Yeah, we are working on the Venice LCP currently, which is totally overlaid on top of the Venice community plan. So it is a bit confusing, but the idea, and this still has to be vetted with the Coastal Commission, is that the zoning districts that we need for the LCP would be folded into the zoning code, but there would be a separate document that just preserves the individual districts that are only relevant to the LCP and all the rules and regulations as a separate document that is sort of an addendum to the code that can be referenced by the Coastal Commission. But in terms of where those districts formally live, they would live in the new zoning code.
So it's sort of a cross cut of it.
Exactly. Yeah, the formal zones are going to be officiated through the new zoning code, but there's going to be sort of a separate reference because the zoning code is, 1,000 pages. So if the Coastal Commission just wants to know what districts are being applied in the future San Pedro LCP, they'll have a document that references those, but it would be a cross-reference to the new zoning code.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
Eberhard?
Yeah, so I'm the president of the Coastal San Pedro Neighborhood Council, but I'm going to talk about downtown. And I want to come back to the idea of historical status for places such as 6th and 7th Street downtown. One of the things that makes it very attractive for film companies, and there's filming going on there constantly, is the fact that along those streets, you have incredible examples of vernacular commercial architecture from the 20s and 30s in particular. And what's really great about them is that a lot of those buildings never got facade improvements, say in the 40s and 50s or even 60s. So you have original features, original glass that's never been covered up, for instance, in some cases, tile work out front at the entrances. I think these are really important things. And I, having had discussions with the business improvement district people, chamber people, etc., is I think there is a concern as much larger, taller buildings have started to creep up from Harbor Boulevard. You could have a situation in which in the middle of a block, some old building or buildings gets demolished and suddenly you've got an 8-story apartment structure. Pretty much ruins the look of the entire block, for example. I think one of the big things that I have heard in these meetings from many of the other members of these different neighborhood council planning committees is the fact that as we have seen a lot of new construction, it's essentially generic. And there really isn't anything that is outstanding in this community in terms of new buildings. They could be anywhere. It's very cookie cutter. And I think there's a tremendous amount of concern in the community that we would lose these things. So, this is really kind of for future reference, but it would be really great if somebody from historic preservation could get down here, do a serious survey and start looking at an overlay district.
Thanks, Doug. We have one of the attendees that had her hand raised, Celia Gonzalez.
Hello. Hi. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very, very much. I had some questions to ask, and it kind of encompasses all of this. And there's so much wonderful things going on across town, and I am a lifetime resident of a few years. So I'm writing things down so I remember what I want to see. All right, about the new buildings in general, it's very interesting. Thank you for commenting about the architectural and the historic overlays, because we do need that. So much of our old downtown area has been torn down. It's history. It's never going to come back. And of course, all the new modern building has gone up. And there's a fraction of the old style from the turn of the century left. And it's very appealing. And every so often we see it in commercials, even if it's a glimpse, but we see them in commercials, we see them in TV series, we see them in movies, between the bridge to literally the breakwater and around our cliffs, we are there. And it's a wonderful thing to see. So that I agree with anybody or everybody who thinks that it'd be a wonderful thing to have historical overlays. Since certainly I wasn't expecting to hear that today. Otherwise, I would have had a list to have submitted to the coastal chair. So I apologize on that. But following that, also beside the historical overlay, I I want to know if there's going to be any offsets for buildings over a certain height. So they're not just all straight up skyscrapers like we have downtown. It's one thing, you know, they're nice, we can't change them, but to have offsets would change the architecture a little bit. It would allow more sunshine, a little more fresh air, a little better views, and a little more visual interest. So there's that. And also on Harbor Boulevard, because we do have so much new residential building and businesses on their way as well, and so many more changes with the cruise center having been improved and will be improved when the Iowa is eventually located to another part of the waterfront. So will there be a grocery store and perhaps a couple, genuinely a couple of travel center gas stations built on Harbor Boulevard adjacent to the cruise center? And then about a mile or two down the road, around 22nd Street and Minor Street at the yard that formerly was the parking lot and maintenance lot for the red car line that is not coming back, unfortunately, but you have this big piece of land there. And the wonderful thing about it is that the travel centers sized fuel stations, they have a mini mart, they have a huge plaza that oversized vehicles, like for instance, the real variety of activities that we have here in town, the boat show, a lot of filming, a lot of oversized, over length, over height, overweight equipment coming through here all year round. Now that quarantine is over and people, you know, business is back to normal. And so we have these wonderful opportunities while there's still land available to be able to have attractive places for visitors, commercial vehicles to come through here, and they're not rushed off the road. There'll be parking, things that are really necessary. I've done a little bit of road tripping. I'm sure everybody has. And there's nothing quite as nice as a travel center gas plaza. You have space for everything, islands and plenty of space to park at, look through your trunk, take your ease and have a bite to eat, fuel up, all the things that you need to do when you're road tripping. So these are all things that are part of our evolving city, and especially our downtown that will be even busier, will make it a lot more appealing to not just us as residents, but everybody we'd like to attract to come here, from the cruise center to the new West Harbor to the film companies to visitors for our Fleet Week, everything that our wonderful community has to offer.
Excuse me,
So
but
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for letting me speak. I appreciate your time. And these are all just thoughts that have come
Thank
up
you.
upon me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Celia. We have Elise and then Alan France.
Oh, I was just wondering if you could refresh my memory. I know years ago, the community spent a lot of time on the downtown San Pedro design guidelines and the downtown community design overlay district. Those guidelines that we worked on, I know we started with the redevelopment agency. Are those incorporated into these new documents that are going to be online, or are those still used today to review development in downtown San Pedro?
So the CDO was incorporated into the CPIO, and now
Okay.
we're incorporating the CPIO into the new zoning code.
So if somebody is developing in downtown San Pedro on 6th or 7th, there is a layer of design review that occurs in that process?
So I think we've really been focusing on taking the standards from the CPIO and applying it directly into the zoning system. As far as design guidelines, I think that we are a little bit limited in terms of what we are able to incorporate into the new zoning code, which is supposed to be a very, very clear and transparent system where we would have it implemented by the Department of Building and Safety. We can look into the design guidelines to see if there are cases that we can bring into the new zoning code. I see Ruben is raising his hand. Maybe he wanted to chime in as well.
Yeah, I'm just listening to everyone's comments, and good evening, committee members. And we really enjoyed just being out here and hearing from you. And I just want just go back and just remind everyone that really our project is about applying the new zoning. This is really not a full-blown community plan update. As you know, that plan update was many years in the making and has just been in place for, you know, four years or so. So really our focus is really just applying that new zoning. And as we talk about, you know, historic overlays and other things, that's a separate process. It really is not part of this process. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's not part of this process. And we're happy to invite OHR to one of these meetings as well. Also keep in mind that, you know, we do have a series of recent state law that really kind of limits our ability to impose standards that could reduce housing capacity in any way. And just to let you know, I mean, the environmental clearance that we're working with is an addendum to that certified EIR for San Pedro. And for us to kind of stay in that realm of an addendum, this is also something that we, you know, in order for us to be able to impose these new standards that might limit capacity, you know, we'd have to potentially look at upzoning in other places. So the reason why Wilmington is able to do what they are doing is because they are doing this balancing act. It's a full-blown community plan update where you have upzones and these application of these more restrictive standards. And then, you know, I just keep that in mind. And I think I'll stop there, but I think there was one other point that I just wanted. Oh, yes. Regarding the design guidelines, once again, that we're very limited in terms of state law, in terms of imposing anything that is not considered an objective standard. So keep that in mind. Design guidelines are very difficult to bring forward at this time. One of the things that we can bring forward always would be any type of regulation that would produce and facilitate the production of lower income housing. So keep that in mind as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruben. Alan, just have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Javier. Thank you, Alyssa, for your presentation, and Alex and Ruben for your supplemental commentary. I would like to follow up on sort of an underlying theme that's been touched on by a number of the earlier speakers. In social media around town, there is, I think, growing frustration with some of the style standards in particular, and as Doug referred to, the generic look of many of these structures. And I was just meeting today with a gentleman who's been involved in a dispute regarding one of the approved developments. It seems to a growing number of people, I think, that San Pedro and presumably other communities have gone through an extended process to develop standards, and then developers, the bigger the better, can simply ask to have them waived. And I wonder if you have any statistics on how many of those requests to waive height, width, floor area coverage, design standards, as Elise referred to, how many of them are prevented from obtaining waivers, or how many do receive the waivers that they request, even if they fail to comply with the municipal code, and even extensions to that, like the density bonuses.
So a lot of the times when we're waiving the requirements, it is in exchange for those affordable housing units through state law, through the density bonus, or in other communities, the TOC program. So it is something that the city is required to approve. I don't know exactly in terms of outside of density bonus if there are other cases of waiving standards. And I don't have any specific statistics on those, but I just wanted to remind everyone about the state density bonus.
Well, just if I can follow up, the code specifies how much standards can be adjusted to comply with the density bonuses. And we've had a number of developments that far exceed those extension limits as in the code. And some people don't like that.
me see.
Are there any statistics or data anywhere on what proportion of applicants are denied waivers? That's it.
Thanks, Alan. June, you had a comment?
I'm sorry?
No, I was asking one of the
Okay.
panelists. June,
Oh,
you had your hand raised?
who?
I guess not.
Oh,
June Burlingame?
Javier, we couldn't hear who you were calling on.
Oh, I was saying June Burlingame.
June.
Oh, yes. I am concerned about the design standards. It seems to me that we have, what's going on here is you say, well, they're very tricky and it's very complex. And then on the other hand, you're saying, well, we can only do what's objective. So my question is what objective items do you have in your design standard review? Or do you have any?
I might be able to speak to that if I can.
Well, I would like somebody to speak to it because a lot of the concern in the community concerns design standards as well as parking and all the rest of this, capacity, et cetera, and we understand the need for transition into a more modern society and to provide more housing at a market rate and for people who need help. But we also are very concerned. I don't see any standards here that help guide us to keep the character or what we consider the character of San Pedro, which attracts so much business. Not just movies, but all kinds. And so what objective standards do you have for design control?
Right. Yeah. So a lot of the new frontage standards, those are all being brought forth with the new zoning code. They are taking a lot of the city's existing design guidelines, they're written to be subjective. They're applied to discretionary projects. The new standards in the code, though, are objective. They're, for example, entry spacing. In a shopfront context, you want regular spaced entrances, one for every 50 feet, one for every 75 feet, one for every 25 feet. Depending on the scale of the district that you're trying to replicate, you could set that. That's an objective standard. Anybody could apply that. We also have transparency percentages. So depending on how much visual interest you want on the street, that could be set as a percentage. In a shopfront context, you probably want to set that around 50%. So 50% of the ground story facade has to be windows, essentially. The ground story height, that can also be measured. There's other things like building ornamentation. That's a little bit more difficult to capture, but materials, if there's a certain type of material that you want to see, maybe it's brick or stone, those could be instituted through design requirements, objective design requirements. So it's really about what are we trying to replicate in new development as opposed to what are we trying to preserve. We always take inspiration from what's there today, but it's really about looking at, what are the goals, what are the policy objectives, and a lot of the new frontage standards are really about promoting human scale development and engaging ground floor frontages. So there are objective ways to do that. And if we want to go into the weeds on our frontage district standards, we can do that probably at a later date.
But there is no, excuse me if I could follow up with one last question and then I'll shut up. But there are no visual objective measures, right? So everything has to be by yardstick and this and that and numbers. And what we were talking about is character, and that does include the substance and all the rest of it. And that just seems rather thrown out the window in a lot of the developments we've seen around town lately. So that's a primary concern for at least some of us.
Thanks, June. Pat, you had a comment, and then we have Chuck. If you could keep it brief so we can let other people talk, please.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why you're doing this. Is it what are the goals of this these changes? Do you have some? Is it to put more people walking on the streets? Is it to make things more beautiful? Is there somebody who really likes bicycles? What's going on here?
None of those.
Hmm?
None of those.
I'm happy to try to answer that. Once again, we're really just trying to bring the San Pedro zoning, the overlay into this new system that is going to be, implemented throughout the city. So, if you think of all of the outreach that occurred with the community plan update over the, I would say over the last 7 to 10 years, all of those outreach meetings then guided, both the policies and the zoning standards that we brought forward in the CPIO. So really, this is just a reflection of the community's vision, and we're just trying to implement this through the new zoning. And I hope that answers your question.
No, it doesn't, because we spent 30 years doing local community plans. We've had 2 iterations of it. It sounds like all the LCP planning effort is out the window, and somebody somewhere has come up with this plan with a lot of numbers and letters on it. I can't figure out what you're doing and why, and what's it do for us.
Yeah. So also
I'm going to echo June Smith's comments with that.
Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, as I say, we want to hear from you very much, and I would just say that, in terms of the LCP, we are waiting for the Venice LCP to be complete before we would apply it in other areas. It is also utilizing the new zoning code. So this is, I think in a way, San Pedro is very fortunate to be one of the first plans, that had both the recent community plan update using the old system, and then also getting this more refined new system. So, other plan areas are in the queue for this zoning code update. But San Pedro is really kind of one of the first. So it really is a kind of an opportunity, and just how this discussion that we're having today, and further refining of some of these standards, the approach, because everything that's in that CPIO, those are your objective standards. Those speak to materiality, those speak to character. And yes, they could go a little further. They could go a lot further if we had an overlay, a historic district. But as I say, that's a separate process. But it's just really about, once again, continuing this dialogue with you and giving you a better zoning, basically.
Thanks, Ruben.
Thank you. This is a little bit off base for this meeting, except when you mentioned that Wilmington is having a full-blown community plan. The area where the fuel supply area is, facility is, that is still in the Wilmington planning area. Is that correct?
What is, Chuck?
I'm sorry. The fuel supply center, that is still in the Wilmington plan, as far as I know.
Yes, it is.
That should not be, especially if they're going to have a full-blown community plan for Wilmington. We've got to make that change. It should be in San Pedro's community plan, because we're the ones that suffer the traffic at 5 points, PV Drive North, to get out of town. That has to be changed, and I want to know why it hasn't been changed or considered yet.
It's something that the neighborhood council has asked several times to be changed.
Okay, but we have to do more than that. We have to change it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Let's see, we have a couple more questions. Let's see. James Campo, you were waiting.
Hi, thank you for the for this presentation, Alyssa and company. Just a comment kind of question. It seems like we're losing our ground floor retail with all these new developments in downtown San Pedro, and waivers have been given to developers because they don't really make that much money. So it seems like pretty much will be apartments on ground floors in the near future of most of the stuff. And so I just wondered if you had a comment about that, and giving the developers waivers in their heights and their parking requirements. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I know that in the San Pedro CPIO, there are existing regulations, sub areas where, it's really requiring ground floor retail, and any of those standards we are carrying forward into the CPIO, and we are, into the new zoning, and it's going to be mapped at the same, like wherever it's currentI'm required, it's going to be required when we apply it in the new zoning code. As far as the waivers, I'm not familiar exactly with which cases that you're referencing, but we are going to be carrying forward the same procedures, and in today's density bonus would also apply in the new zoning code as well.
I think the one that James is particularly referring to, Alyssa, is one that the Pacific Avenue community redevelopment plan required there be ground floor retail, and that plan was still in effect, and the developer got a waiver to it. So I guess one of the questions would be, how are you treating the Pacific Avenue redevelopment standards? Because those were kept as a separate document evidently when the CPIO was developed, according to who I talked to at planning.
Okay. Let's see, Noel and then Doug, if we could keep it brief.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, my comment just sort of dovetails off of 4 or 5 speakers who have already said something similar. And we've spent at least 10 years on developing the San Pedro Community Plan and the CPIO, and very detailed negotiations back with the city and the community, and the city and the community. And what's happened is that rather than a ceiling, the requirements that were set forth in the San Pedro Community Plan and the CPIO have become a floor. And all a developer needs to do is come in and ask for a bunch of off-menu incentives, and the CPC, City Planning Commission, just rubber stamps them, and there you go. And so we're talking about how important the San Pedro Community Plan is, and how important the CPIO is, and how we're rolling all of those requirements into this new zoning structure. And yet it's easy. All they have to do is come in and say, no, sorry, that's not enough. We want more. And then they get it. And what's the point of spending years of negotiating and working with the community to pay attention to some things that are so vital? What makes San Pedro San Pedro? What makes San Pedro unique? It's the incredible maritime heritage that our city has. The canned tuna industry started here, for example. I mean, we've got a deep, rich history in San Pedro, and a lot of that is reflected in the architecture. It's reflected in the people. It's reflected in the cultures. We have a huge Croatian culture, largest outside of Croatia, a huge Italian culture. People from all over the world come here and are drawn to this community because of the very special and unique characteristics. I mean, San Pedro in the coastal zone is even considered a special coastal community by the Coastal Commission. And yet it seems that with all of this new zoning, and even with the zoning that we worked out, it seems like that's being ignored in favor of just doing some, gigantic cookie cutter developments all over the place to, maximize profits for developers and tax revenue for the city, and, let the special characteristics of our town just sort of fall by the wayside. And, that's not okay. So I don't know what to say beyond that. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of questions. First of all, and I may have missed this at some point, but when is this new code going into effect?
So we're currently developing our zones, and they will be released for public review and public comment. This project has to go through all the traditional approvals, through CPC, Plum, and City Council. So it wouldn't likely go into effect until 2024.
Okay, so we'll have, I hope, plenty of time to make comment and consider this. I'm just going to reiterate quickly that I too have been involved in at least the last two iterations of community plan updates going back 30 years here in San Pedro. And I will, you know, obviously you've seen the concern here of everyone in terms of trying to preserve as much as possible what makes this place this place. And also I can tell you, you know, echoing the words of a, you know, couple decades ago, a former general manager of the planning department, you know, who said that the value of property in Los Angeles isn't based on the zone, it's based on what the developer thinks they can get.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed. It absolutely has not changed. So to be blunt, I guess the next step for us is to pay a lot of attention to this code. And my other question is, at what point can we start fleshing out the things that we can possibly get required to attempt to customize as much as possible what's in this code? Is that part of the process as we go forward over the course of the next year? I understand that things like overlay zones and some other stuff are going to have to be a separate process. And I'm guessing that should probably begin pretty much immediately. So, you know, that's my question. I guess we should start taking a very close look at what's there. And is now the time to really start to talk to you folks about how it can be, I guess, customized, for lack of a better word.
So, you know, earlier Alex mentioned that there are features of the new zoning code that, you know, regulate, for example, building material. So we can require certain building materials in a, you know, given potentially commercial districts, so things like that. We can definitely consider, you know, public opinion on and, you know, comment and take into consideration to see if that's something that we can incorporate into our zones. But, you know, for the most part, you know, as my manager Ruben mentioned, we are working with the, you know, existing San Pedro community plan, the existing CPIO, and just bringing forward the new zoning system. But, you know, as I mentioned, there are elements that we can introduce or bring forward that could hopefully get better design out of projects.
And now is the time for us to start talking about that. Yes.
Absolutely. If there are specific design elements that you're interested in, you know, I definitely want to hear about them.
Okay. I'm always happy to give our planning committees assignments. So.
Thanks, Doug. I have one last question.
Who did you
Pat. Oh, I was letting Pat ask his question.
Wait a minute, I had my hand up before Pat did. I'm sorry.
Oh, I thought you hadn't forgotten. Go ahead, Diana.
I have a comment and a question. And my comment kind of goes along with a lot of what's been said about the downtown area and the historical nature. And, you know, you say when we've got to stick with it's not a new community plan update, but I think if you go in and read the community plan, I think the intent of what was done in the downtown area was to preserve as much as possible the historical nature of downtown. So I think that is in the plan conceptually. And I think, again, that what you're doing over in Wilmington, bringing in that kind of an idea as one of the customizations would make sense. Along with that, we have the city did a pretty extensive historical structures survey. There is a copy of it on the Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council website. If you want it, I can send it to you. I think it might be very helpful because I think it does go through some very specific things that in looking at will give clues to what might make good standards. My question has to do with how all this dovetails with the upzoning that's going to occur to meet our arena numbers.
Yeah, you know, as we mentioned, you know, the environmental clearance that we are pursuing is an addendum to the certified EIR. So we are not doing a full-blown community plan update where we would be looking at increasing the capacity.
So San Pedro will be exempt from this process that's going on across the city right now?
I'm not saying it would be exempt. I would say that this project is not implementing.
Right, I understood that. I asked how this was dovetailing with the other project. Are you talking to each other? Are these totally separate? What's the?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, the rezoning program is really really just rolling out. So we're happy to reach out to our housing policy unit and certainly put this, you send this message and perhaps they can come out to one of your next meetings as well and just talk about the progress on that rezoning program.
Okay, Diana, and now Pat.
I don't think I got an answer to my earlier question about what happens to the local community planning areas. You have about 38 of them now in the city. Once this is adopted, those all go away? That's one question. And the second one is, you mentioned just now an EIR addendum or an update, Ruben, and has a determination been made as to the level of the environmental review that will be required for adoption of this zoning code? And then third question is, how does it mesh with the coastal zone requirements?
You missed a bunch of, you must have slept through a bunch of this.
No.
There was a whole discussion.
Okay, so I'm sorry, can you just repeat the first question? Let's start there.
The local community planning areas, what happens to them with the new zoning?
Yeah, so certainly all of our 35 community plan areas and the 2 district plans, Port of Los Angeles, Lala, those stay in place. So we're not changing the community plan, and we're really not changing the boundaries of the community plan either. That's really not part of the scope of this project. It's really about just applying the new zoning system and land use designation nomenclature.
So in the future, will the LCPs be in effect and we'll be able to work on changing them or not?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I mentioned earlier that, really that Venice LCP is the first and the pilot. And once that's complete, then I think
okay,
we can work on areas, Wilmington and San Pedro.
What level of environmental review is going to be required for adoption of the zoning code? If you gave determination on that yet, or?
Yeah, so as I say, what we are scoped with, what our environmental consultants feel comfortable is that this would be an addendum, okay? An addendum to the certified EIR. And I'm not sure if you just would like me to explain that a little further, I'm happy to do that.
An addendum is not a word I'm familiar with in the environmental laws. There's supplemental EIRs and things like that. There's categorical exemptions. There's mitigated declarations, that sort of thing.
Right. Right. So you can think of this as a report to the file, to the environmental file, an addendum to that EIR. It does not require that comment period. And basically you're essentially answering 3 questions. Has there been a change of circumstance? Are you triggering new impacts, or are you making existing impacts worse? And so that's really the test and the analysis that we would do through that process. But it is not an EIR. There would not be a comment period. Now, if we could not answer those 3 questions in any one of the topic areas, then yes, we would probably be looking at a subsequent or supplemental EIR.
Okay, so that hasn't been decided yet as to whether what level of environmental review is going to be required, if any.
Yes, I mean, it has not been determined. It is a step-by-step process. We'll have to wait and see what, as we move through and get things a little bit more confirmed in terms of our zoning, but really, I think, if we just, the project as it is scoped currently is, an addendum would be appropriate in our best assessment.
No such thing as an addendum. Okay.
All right, thanks, Pat. And I guess one last question, and then, you could sense the frustration of local residents. We had a lot of projects that, we would like them to follow the rules of the zoning and the CPIO But unfortunately, they become a density bonus project, and then, everything goes out the window. And is there a way to protect certain parts of the city from having that type of developments happen? I know you're limited to what you can do because of the state regulations, but if we had like a historic district or something like that, could that protect it?
Well, even in a historic district, you can apply for a density bonus. It just goes through the process of going before the HPOZ board. So, I'm just not sure how to answer your question. I think that, as a city, we are, if Alex wanted to make a comment, that is how you raise your hand.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, the historic stuff aside, that's correct. What the new system does do though, is it puts a ceiling on what the maximum bonus you can get is into the district in a very transparent way. So right now you've got your base floor area ratio, your base number of stories, and then you can bonus on top of that. And that's not really explicit in the underlying zone. But the zones that will get approved through this process will have a maximum FAR, which will be a very finite ceiling, a maximum number of stories, and a maximum building width. And those are all going to be the on-menu incentives, and you can't exceed those through the incentive program. So those are going to be agreed upon in the district. So it's going to be a very transparent set of standards, and that ceiling will be clear.
Can you repeat those? It was the stories, the FAR, and
Building width.
thank you.
Which is a new standard that we're introducing to kind of try to get more fine-grained development. And when a project comes in, they propose a certain amount of affordable housing. You can exceed that base building width up to a point, but that point is the ceiling. That's the max, and you can't go beyond that.
So that'll be stated.
That'll be stated. That the districts that we're developing right now have an explicit max bonus for each of those three components.
Thank you. And I think we're going to wrap it because we still have more items, and we appreciate your time and the presentation to our community. And definitely we will follow up on the progress of the development of this. And again, thank you.
I do have one quick question though, Oliver.
If you make it quick. June.
It will be very quick. What happens when we put all of these things in place and we get overruled by the planning commission? They just pass it through anyway. Which is what is happening over and over and over again. What?
Well, that's kind of what we were talking about.
Have?
Is what we were talking about, the density bonus project.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so corrupt as far as most of us are concerned that we have to bring lawsuits, and then, we don't have the money that the developers do and whatnot. So what good is all this? Make us feel good?
Well,
I'm sorry.
We can help.
I'm a little bit too old and too jaded, but I've seen so much of it that I'm fed up. Okay, that's it.
Thanks, Yun. Once again, thank you, Elisa, thanks, Ruben, and thanks, Alex, for your time and your presentation. And we look forward to seeing you again when you have more material to share.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Okay, we're going to move on to, we're going to skip item 3, correct? Diana?
Tim is here, so I think.
Oh, okay.
Just
We're
trying
gonna
to
do
promote it.
in the order that we had it, which is update from CD15, and I believe we have our councilman here, McCosker.
Hello, how you doing? Hope you're well.
Hi, Tim. Thanks.
I don't know if you all heard, but I've been on the sidelines for a few days. I tested positive for COVID on Saturday evening. Fortunately, very slight symptoms, but I have symptoms nonetheless. Never had a fever, but I've had the opportunity to be in council remotely using the statutory authority to do that, such as it is. And but just in case you were curious, and I know some folks have been worried about it and dropping food off at the house. I'm fine. I'm just going to isolate for 5 days. I think I'll be back in council on Friday. I was listening in because I saw this on Sergio's calendar, so I thought I would listen in. I think Sergio was going to give the update. Did you have particular issues upon which you wanted him to update?
Yeah, I had given him a few things. But
Okay,
he said that maybe you were gonna give the update if you were here.
you can run through them, but I do want to talk about one thing in particular, and very much in particular, and then you can run through the issues, and I'm happy to respond to him cold because he didn't give me the issues. I was listening in because I wanted to hear this discussion, the discussion you just had. I had it with Vince Bertoni a couple of days ago, and I appreciate the insights that you all made. But one thing I did want to raise, I wanted to make sure that Sergio raised if I wasn't on here, and that has to do with something that all of our neighborhood councils weighed in on, and that's the sign at the end of the 110 freeway. I know that we went through great efforts to make, we as a city, we as a community made great efforts to acquire that property. We acquired the property upon which the lease sat. It's a land lease for the sign. We knew that the lease was expiring and has expired as of the end of the calendar year. I've dropped a motion and got advice from General Services and notified the company that the lease would not be extended and that they needed to remove the sign. The company said they were going to remove the sign. They pulled pulled an initial permit for demolition. You know, we have a multi-phase process for a demolition. They pulled the initial permit. They did the site plan review. They submitted elevations. I think the demo permit is going to issue, but I have heard through the grapevine, and you all would know better than I, that same company, Regency, has reached out to our neighborhood councils, and they want to make presentations to see if they can entice the neighborhood councils to reach out to me and ask me to extend the lease or open a new lease term. So I am telling you that you can have any meeting you want, but I would urge you that we all stick together. We all say to them in no uncertain terms that we acquired that property and we terminated the lease for a reason, and we want to do so. I am prepared. If they are not going to go voluntarily as a tenant, I'm prepared to have the city attorney issue with a notice of eviction. I'm prepared to assert that any entrance onto the property is a trespass. I'm prepared to assert any legal remedy in our power because I want that sign down.
The president of Central Neighborhood Council responded to the request saying there's no reason to meet, no reason to meet. And nobody else responded to that request to meet either.
Good. Well, I'll trust the judgment of any neighborhood council if they do want to meet, but I would just urge you to let them know in no uncertain terms, if you agree with me, that the sign absolutely has to come down.
I think it's been a pretty strong feeling with the neighborhood council, so.
Great.
Yeah,
And the chamber.
I don't think anybody on the council would support anything for them.
I appreciate that. Okay.
I don't
So-
know. I haven't gotten an offer yet. We have not heard.
Because they know what we'll say.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we definitely know what you'll say. I did want to point one thing out to everyone, and I have already done this. If you check the council file, you will find a public comment from one Douglas Epperhart supporting demolition of the billboard. And we can do that as individuals. Okay, you don't have to wait for any official action or anything, but anybody can go to the city clerk's website and make a public comment as an individual. I've done it, and I would urge everybody on this meeting to do the same thing.
Good. So I will tell you that it would be great if you could keep doing that. Please feel free to keep me posted if they reach out to you. I know they reached out to Central for sure.
Yeah.
I did meet with the city attorney, and I've given direction, and that direction is proceeding. And so, you know, it might take weeks longer than we expected, but it's going to be painful for the other side. I feel like there has been bad faith on the other side of this equation. So, Diana, what were the issues that you asked Sergio to speak on?
Yeah, and you may or may not know, what's the status of the target the marketplace at Target. It hasn't been scheduled as far as we know for a zoning administrative hearing, so wondered what was happening, if we know.
All I know is that it has not been scheduled, and I can make sure that we follow up on that. So I'll be sure to get the information and get it to this group as quickly as possible and each of you individually.
And same was kind of true of the Starbucks that came in, wanted to put the Starbucks on Western, and seems the last time I've talked to them anyway, nothing more was, they were still negotiating the lease, so just wondered if anything had come forward, if you'd heard from them.
No, they haven't reached out to me. Not Pedro Starbucks.
The storage facility on that's being proposed on Miraflores. These three happen to be Northwest, one specific, and that one, there is an issue that I need to discuss with you that has to do with the trees. There's some pine trees that we don't want taken down. And when we went to the ZA hearing, the problem is that the way the CPIO is written, the developer thinks they have to take the trees down and plant something else. And the zoning administrator didn't understand and kind of threw it back to planning. So we're going to need an intervention to make sure we can keep that beautiful row of pine trees.
Draw me a picture and tell me who it was, and I'll make the call.
We'll send you. Jason,
That's what you should do in my own life. Okay.
Let's see. What's happening? I was looking for the landlord at 111 North Harbor. The new owner. So, and Sergio can get that for us, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just going through my list. Do you know what the latest is on the YWCA's plans to develop some kind of?
I went to one of their luncheon when they were thanking the state and federal actors who had provided the money, and they gave a little walkthrough of the development proposal. I do not know the status of when they would start that project. Happy to get it though.
I heard that they changed the number of units being proposed.
They did from when I first heard it, yes, and it was pretty substantially changed. And I can have them come back, or I can get.
Yeah, I think we'll just have them come back. So the answer, if they're moving forward. Hope on 6th Street.
Hope on 6th is still in planning, still in process. Been really, really difficult. I mean, this is Hope on 6th could have been a poster child for why the mayor adopted the emergency orders. I mean, it was the city that has put so many obstacles in the way of Hope on 6th.
What are UCLA's plans for the what was the housing for Marymount?
Yeah, I don't know. They've asked for a meeting, which I haven't sat down and had the meeting with them. They wanted to talk about the whole interrelation of what they want to do at Alta-C, of course, because they have a facility at Alta-C, the housing, and then other opportunities in the downtown area. So I have a meeting set for that, and I'll be happy to report back after I have the meeting.
The Boutique Hotel.
I will get a status of that one.
Well, yeah, Sergio may have found some of this. I don't know. This is the I asked him about the Topaz building. Has that actually sold?
I do not believe it has sold. No.
Okay. Yeah, we had heard that it had, and then I heard that it hadn't. So.
Right. I heard the same.
Okay, I think those were the main thing. And then he was going to talk a little bit about the EFID motion.
EIFD?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let him do that. Can I ask a question? Can I ask you all a question? Tell me about the LCP. Your thoughts on the LCP. That came up with me and Vince Bertoni in the same meeting. And I know they are working diligently on the local coastal plan to get it certified in Venice, and of course we're next if I can believe his workload. But where are the neighborhood councils on proceeding with the LCP?
Well, we have
Coastal?
the certified land use right now. And, you know, as long as they can keep it at least as protective or strengthen it, I'm happy to see an LCP come along. My fear is that they're going to try to dilute it using this Recode LA process. So that's a discussion we may want to have just to make sure that's not going to happen. But I don't see why they can't start at any time or do it in conjunction with this Recode LA process.
Yeah, I think the impression in central planning is that it's less of a, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but what it sounded to me was it's less of a priority in the San Pedro coastal area because we have fewer disputes, we have fewer issues that make it to the coastal commission, and it's a much more intensive, much more difficult workload for the commission and for the city in Venice, and so. My thoughts were that we are better off having a certified local coastal plan, and it puts all of us in a better position. And your point is well taken that that would be true if in fact we can hang on to all of the protections that we have now in our local zoning. Right?
Right, because we want to prevent what's happening in Venice from happening in San Pedro, I think.
And the LCP process is really a hallmark of community involvement. It came about back in the early 70s because exemptions from it, and I forget what you call them, but you know, the going rate was $4,500 for a donation to a councilman for a waiver to build a gas station.
Are you talking about the coastal plan, or are you talking about the
LCP,
community plan?
it's community plan.
He's talking about the coastal.
Oh, you're
you're
talking
talking about the coastal plan, right? The
Local coastal program,
Oh,
yeah.
no, a certified local coastal.
Never mind. I do have a question for you on the billboard.
Oh, sure, go ahead. I think I have what I need on the LCP on the issue and get back to
The Wilmington has a small digital sign that advertises events in Wilmington. Also in the port, and it was paid for by the port out of China shipping settlement funds. I'm wondering what you would think of a sign either at that location or maybe the Welcome Park that, and that one in Wilmington is administered at least by the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
The small sign, something like that, there at the end of the freeway, advertising events occurring in San Pedro, including port events. What would you think of that?
I don't know that I would want to spend years working on bringing down a sign to put up a sign. My initial reaction is that and I know that what sign you're talking about in Wilmington, and they can be attractive, but I don't know that at the end of the freeway there where we have the bridge and we want to do beautification projects and maybe have some art. I don't know that we would want to do it there. I would come to this group and say, you know, what do you all think of having a changeable copy electronic sign at the end of the freeway at the beginning of Gaffey?
Well, how about a Welcome Park a little bit further down?
It would be a little further down, and I get the value of being able to announce community events, and it can be attractive. But again, I will say that I'm initially not a fan of the idea, but I certainly would defer to the will of my constituency if it were to make sense, if it could be attractive, if it could be maintained, if it could be something that's an amenity for the community.
Thank you.
We have a question by one of our attendees, Celia Gonzalez.
Celia, hello.
Hi, thank you. We've been listening to, just as everybody said about that billboard, and it occurred to me that perhaps until it does come down, and please, no electric signs, or that's the last thing you need, is to have people looking at the signs between texting the signal and thinking they're going to stop and rolling through it and hitting all the traffic between they're looking at the sign, their phones and everything else. How about just to deal the billboard up with a local artist murals, welcome to beautiful San Pedro, and then a list of what's going on in the coming months. Painted, however, it would not be expensive, something that would not cost anything. If there's already can lights that work there, replace the bulbs, and not too bright, and so they could go off and on sunset to sunrise, and just be a soft visual. We already have a welcome park full of homeless people, along with the bridge that goes over Gaffey Street. We don't need to add more sleeping areas for people to park themselves and their gear, to make it look even more alluring, to have them buy that sign that we have all been waiting to come down. It's just a thought, but we have so much local talent here. People could replace it every week if they want. They could paint it over and put Welcome San Pedro and then add something to it this month, that month, the next month, until it's gone. And then just whatever is there, beautiful welcome to our town. Until then, please, no electronic signs. And thank you so much for letting me say something. I appreciate it. Goodbye.
Thanks for your thoughts.
We have a couple of other people. Noel.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Tim. We really appreciate it. And kind of getting back to your question about the LCP, you know, we have a 1991 approved San Pedro local coastal plan. And I just want to emphasize what Robin was saying about how important it is to keep our local coastal program, when it's eventually done, to keep it as strong as or stronger than the original coastal plan, because that addresses so many of the issues that we're talking about, maintaining the character and the maritime heritage, and, you know, protecting the coastal zone. But something that goes along with that, that's, you know, when the Coastal Act was put into law in 1976, for the first 5 years or so, the Coastal Commission was tasked with maintaining affordable housing in the coastal zone. And Henry Mello came up with the Mello Act and took the authority away from the Coastal Commission and put it in with the local municipalities, in our case, the city of Los Angeles. And without gobbling up too much time, we could certainly talk about this when we meet. Now the city is finally putting a Mello Act ordinance into place, and that was like almost ready to go. And there was probably about 90% of it that was great, and about 10% of it that was really problematic, because it was creating carve-outs that would actually have hurt the affordable housing aspects, which was the whole point of the Mello Act ordinance anyway. It's been kind of not going anywhere for a period of months now, and we can talk about it again in greater detail. But I think it's really important, some last minute amendments that were thrown in there, and some wording where in the original Mello Act, it was forbidden from changing a structure from its, you know, residential use and its affordable use into a structure and into something that isn't that. And now there's wording in there that would allow, for example, an all residential building that's affordable and a bunch of it RSO, for example, to be turned into mixed use, which is not the way the wording of the original Mello Act is. So these are some things. 90% of it is great, but there are some things that are problematic that still need to be fixed. And you're in a position to be able to do that. And I'd love to talk about that with you and Robin in greater detail.
I appreciate discussing that. Yeah, actually, I raised that issue with Vince Bertoni and his staff, and this is what I call the structure versus units issue.
Right. Exactly.
And it's pending in front of. There's some litigation, I think, involved in right now, right?
Not surprised. Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of litigation, and we need to sort that out and make sure that we have an understanding about what structure means and what residential units mean. So thank you. I will keep my eye on that issue as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Robin, is your hand still up, or do you have another comment?
Yeah, I have a very quick question. I'm in a citywide group called Coalition for a Beautiful Los Angeles, and we'd like to brief you, Tim, on the different sign programs. And I just wondered what was the best way to get on your calendar, or to reach you, or a scheduler, or how does that work?
Yeah, so for everybody, the two best ways, the two best addresses are my assistant, Lydia Soto, LIDIA .Soto, SOTO, at lacity.org. And also the other good address is councilmember.mccosker at lacity.org. the good news is Lydia gets both of those, so they are sure to be found. If you send it straight to me, there's 100 ways to get a hold of me, and I get 1,000 messages a day, and I feel bad when I can't get back to people.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you. Chuck, you had a question or comment for?
Chuck?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Yeah, Chuck.
Oh, congratulations, congratulations, Tim. Long time no see.
Yes, good to see
Speaking
you.
of welcoming people to San Pedro, I have a very simple drawn-up plan to change that smokestack, welcoming people to San Pedro for a beacon light, changing it into a beacon light.
Huh.
I'd like to discuss that with you. Maybe you're very, it goes Beacon and San Pedro goes together.
Yep. Yep.
It should be a very simple, cheap way to go.
Okay, so you said there is a proposal to put a beacon on there. Is that what you're saying?
I have a plan for it.
Oh, okay.
It's never gone anywhere so far. Maybe you can help.
Yeah.
Maybe. Let's take a look at it, Mr. Hart. I'll make sure we get together. Okay.
I have a meeting scheduled with Janet Gunther with you later on.
Oh, good. Yeah, I traded emails with Janet today.
Yeah.
Good.
We can talk about it then if it's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chuck. Greg, you had a comment.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, for coming to our meeting and for giving us an update on the billboard. Another thought on the billboard for you and for Doug. If Regency were to reach out to Doug asking for some sort of meeting with Coastal, do you think it might make sense for us to respond by saying, sure, come to one of our next board meetings, make your presentation in public, and then hear from the public and the board exactly what we think of what you're doing, just to put them on the spot some more?
That's actually my first thought was that would be the best thing to have happen. I think that they believe that you're a bunch of yahoos and they can walk in and say, guess what? We'll fix up one of your local parks, or we'll give you, free coffee and donuts. I think that would be great. I don't think
I just want to say I would prefer that we do that after March 1 when we have an in-person meeting.
Okay.
As long as we have security.
God, I hope we don't have to wait till March 1, but I get what you're saying.
Well, yeah, you get what I'm saying. It's rather more impactful to have 100 angry people yelling at you than, the decorous Zoom meetings that we run. But frankly, I don't know if I want to waste the time, but that's up to the board, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. Diana, you had another.
Yeah, I did. Actually, I wanted, Tim, while you're here, we have another item on our agenda tonight. And I know it's something that you've got some thoughts about, and that is this need for traffic enforcement. What in the world we can do about it? And I've been contemplating proposing a resolution to instruct our budget advocates to advocate for more funding for traffic enforcement. But then when I heard about all of the vacancies, the unfilled positions, I wondered to what extent that was part of the problem. What ideas do you have? What advice do you have?
Yeah, this is all over the district, but it's all over the city, but certainly it's every meeting I'm in. People say, you can't believe it, Tim. You'd never believe this. People speed and they go right through stop signs and nobody pays attention. They double park, or they park in the middle of the, in Wilmington, they park in the middle of the street in the turning lane. And I think it's a social result of post-pandemic. I mean, when the streets were empty and folks were racing around, I don't know what it is, but there's some sort of social contract that just disintegrated, and people are not following the rules. And we do not have very many employees in some of our most important departments. I mean, it is hard for us to find traffic enforcement folks, to retain folks that be street sweepers, to be workers on the sidewalk, streets, curbs, and gutters. We're down between 30 and 15% in every department. And the ones that are only 15% are the proprietaries, where they pay higher rates. And we're down 30% in places like, personnel and DOT and sanitation. So those are all the problems. You didn't want to hear the problems. You want to hear what are the solutions. I mean, I chair personnel now, and so I'm getting all these reports. These are most of the Zoom meetings I had all day today and yesterday and the day before, is talking about, these issues. We have to hire up. for sure. I think that there are probably strategic ways that we can deploy our existing resources, whether they're police or DOT or ticket riders or different resources for different functions, to make sure that we remind folks that we're here and you got to stop. And if you write a bunch of tickets in a very public area in the middle of town, I mean, folks will see. I do want to, for some of our issues, I do want to cross deputize folks. This is not a San Pedro issue, but a Wilmington issue, where we're having a lot of problems with trucks driving through. I want to actually give DOT officials the ability to write tickets for illegal truck driving, illegal truck traffic through neighborhoods, which they do not have the authority under statutory law now. So I guess what I'm doing is just giving you sort of a stream of consciousness. I'm just thinking through over these past couple of weeks, these past several weeks, I mean, how we can deploy our resources while we're trying to hire up and bring people in. We really have a crisis on traffic, and that is also why you probably saw in the paper today that we have a really high death rate. I mean, we have a lot of injuries to pedestrians and a lot of traffic collisions. And one of the easiest ways to deal with these issues in some streets are the road diets. And you know how much people hate road diets. It's sort of a catch-22. We don't have enough, we have bad social behavior. We don't have a lot of employees to sort of manage it. And one of our best techniques, reducing the number of lanes does slow down traffic and does have the effect of saving lives, but people don't like it. So I just described to you all of my problems. Does anybody want to be a council member? I will keep coming back to neighborhood councils and say, and folks like you who are engaged and say, give me ideas. But my current idea is that we got to hire, we have to deploy resources properly, and we have to do things like stanchions and ballards and road diets where it makes sense, just to begin to get our arms around the traffic speeding and flagrancy of scofflaws.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have a couple of questions. James Campo.
Yes. Hi, thank you, Tim, for attending. And the two things, and Deb brought it up first. Back when Councilwoman Hahn was in there, I brought her the same proposal about the smokestack. And the smokestack, if you just close your eyes and think of a lighthouse out on a rock, it's a perfect lighthouse. All you have to do is have a little balcony around it up about 30 feet high and paint it, and it looks like a lighthouse. And that could kind of be a theme of a welcome to San Pedro, since we do have a historical lighthouse out at the Land's End. And since you were touching on speeding and parking enforcement, yes, parking enforcement, we need it huge, and it's really laughable for people that constantly are avoiding the parking rules that you call, at night. Parking enforcement is not coming out. They're not. Right. So we need, but maybe we could talk about that. But I was proposed back Coastal Transportation Land Committee back in the spring, and we talked about with Officer Roa South traffic, and he listened to the idea and he thought it was a great idea, but he smiled and he said that would have to be political will, and that's where you come in, Mr. McCosker, because if I send you something, or maybe we'll send it through the if we can get it through committee, and then thus through the board members, a driving enforcement unit. And you mentioned a hiring problem. Well, a parking enforcement officer salary versus an LAPD. I think LAPD should only be engaged when there's pursuit. And other than that, could you imagine a driving enforcement unit looking just like parking enforcement police people that are in little cars, they're parked, and they have a radar and they have a sound decibel meter, and they can, and this goes right into a computer. They don't engage with these people at all. and they get the speeders because LAPD is not, hanging out, watching them speed down Gaffey and the Raceway corridor between 25th and 37th Street. It is a race corridor, and there are plenty others, of course. But if a driving enforcement officer, which looks like a parking enforcement officer in a little car that looks like Doug drives, and he has a sound decibel meter, and he has a radar, and he doesn't even get out of the car. And this is just plugged, and just 10 of those guys driving around, or women, sorry, would make a huge difference. It would be a great, everybody's driving around with modified exhausts that exceed lawful limits, and everybody is driving 80 miles an hour down Gaffey between 25th and 37th. So, right there, you could pay for the program. But I think a pilot program would be great, but thank you for listening.
Thanks, Jane.
It's intriguing, actually. I would just add to that, we'll talk about it and think about it. I'll add to that there's a great deal of movement, as you've probably seen across the city and across the country, to take armed police officers out of traffic enforcement anyway. So
absolutely.
Let me just give a thought to it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ethan, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to say along the lines of the parking enforcement, I'm going to give them a hats off, because just last night, someone left their car parked in front of my driveway, not with the hazards on, just parked, just blocking the whole thing. Couldn't get out of my driveway. I called them and I said, well, first pass. They came and put a ticket on it. I didn't have them towed right away. I went with a friend to the store, came back. They were still there an hour and a half later. Now I called the parking enforcement again, and within about an hour, that car was towed away. And I think it was towed around 10 o'clock at night. So yes, they will come at night and they will tow them away. So thank you, parking enforcement.
That's great. Did you call parking enforcement directly, or you go through 311?
I called them directly.
Wow.
I was on my phone. I just said parking enforcement LA number, and that was it.
Good for you. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Celia Gonzalez, you had a comment?
Nope. I think she took her hand down.
Oh, okay. Doug.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to look up to see when I could talk. Thank you. Thank you. A comment about commercial truck traffic within neighborhoods. This is something that's allowed if the operator has the specific paperwork with the address of the customer they are serving. And there's also professional mapping online that anybody who is transporting any kind of commercial cargo that's overweight, over length, over height for city streets, which is why there's weight limits, so they're not crushed. They need to have these maps, so they do go on specific thoroughfares without hitting cars. They're wide enough, and they're where they should be, as close as possible to it, with the address, the correct paperwork for whom they're offering service to. So this is something I know from experience, and commercial, wherever this is happening at, those customers need to make sure that they're also offering this, because someplace I worked at, they actually did do that for when they needed service. So they would get their deliveries and pickups, and there wasn't a problem with the police trying to tow away our equipment, us and everybody else. So that's a real thing. And also about the speeding, I live Pacific between 38th and 39th. I'm across from the Point Fermin Market and the city diner place across the street, which is very busy for traffic. But it also, this area, because we're at the end of the world, it's very popular for speeding. People speed from 22nd all the way to, if they don't get the light at the Stephen White Drive / 35th Street, they speed up the hill until they get to the 39th Street stop sign, and then they speed from there. And this is genuine. You can hear the engines winding up. You can hear it. And then they speed till they get to Shepherd Street, and then so on and so forth until they go to as far as they're going on Paseo del Mar and come back. And it's very rare anymore, it seems, that anybody but the bus and the fire department, they're the only ones who genuinely stop at any of the stop signs up in this area. It's very interesting to watch, whether you're promenading with the dog, reading on your porch, whatever, you just watch them whiz by. they'll whiz by as you're walking the intersections too. The only reason there's a stop sign at 39th Street, because somebody was killed. Her children were immediately orphaned while she came home one evening with ice creams. So this is what we're dealing with. I understand Monday day, I missed it. The police were out here offering citations and wrote quite a few of them. But when they can be deployed, when they have time in their calendar, it's welcomed. But unfortunately, it's not often enough because it really winds up here Thursday afternoon till Sunday evening. Thank you for your time. There's so much that you're getting acquainted with. Everybody has something great to offer. I appreciate you letting me speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Delia. Let's see, we have Doug, and that should be the last.
Okay, so the other night, a couple of days ago, I was driving down Walker, and at the intersection of 24th and Walker, right out where Busy Bee is, there are blinking red lights in the middle of the street where the crosswalk is, one on either side of the intersection. Is that, I believe that's a four-way stop now. And I thought that was sort of fascinating because I'm guessing that's something that DOT put there as some kind of experiment.
Yeah.
But it was, I don't know if anybody else has seen it or aware of it, but I gotta tell you, it really calls your attention to the fact that that's a stop sign and you need to stop there in the evening.
Is it on the sign itself?
No, it's in the street.
In the street. Huh.
In the middle, you know, the middle stripe up the middle of the street.
Yeah.
It's on Walker.
Okay.
I don't know if they have I didn't notice them on 24th, but it's on Walker, one on either side of the intersection.
That's interesting. I'll have to ask about that. You know, I know DOT gave me a heads up that we're going to see those flashing yellows for pedestrians, and they think that that's a very creative thing and it's effective, but I've never heard of this one.
I've never seen it. It was just one small blinking red light on either side of the intersection, right in the middle on the ground. And in fact, I took a look at it as I drove by, and it's like the little reflectors.
Yep.
Only they blink and they're red.
I'll have to ask about that.
So, yeah, I didn't know if anybody else had seen it. And for those of you who, you know, have horror stories, a week and a half ago, I was driving down Grand Avenue and saw a car hit a pedestrian, knock them down. And I got to tell you, it's not something you want to see.
Right.
But yeah, there are people getting hurt. So
yeah, there's a lot of, you know, in also in Wilmington. I guess Wilmington is my go-to today. You know, we just did a traffic calming. It started just before I came aboard, but it finished after I was sworn in. And it was a traffic calming on Anaheim Street. Anaheim Street through the length of Wilmington is probably one of the most dangerous streets for pedestrians in the city. And a lot of locals, seniors and kids, have been injured or killed in Wilmington over the last year and a half. And folks don't like and I understand, they don't like the traffic calming because it's slower and it's different and it's more, it's just not as convenient as it was for the lucky drivers who don't hit anybody. And so I've asked for a report back from DOT. And so I'm going to do this risky thing of we're going to have live reports in community where we're going to talk to angry folks who don't like the traffic calming and they have legit reasons why they don't like them. And we're also going to be talking about the safety measures and trying to appeal to if it works. I mean, it's going to be real info. I'm going to have a real info about, you know, whether, you know, how many accidents we saw through the first 4 months or 6 months, however long it takes of this implementation. And if it works, we'll argue that. And if it hasn't worked, we will look to DOT and say, you know, why did you go through all this? I'm really happy to let the numbers speak for themselves, but we have to do something about traffic safety. I mean, people are dying. Pedestrians are dying needlessly. Cars, as we know, cars are quieter and faster and more agile, and drivers are more reckless and speedy. And it's just a bad combination, especially in a city where we want to create these walkable areas and you know, and commercial zones where people can walk to get coffee or walk to work. So something has to give here, and we're gonna have to figure it out. That's my soapbox.
Thanks, Tim.
My COVID infused soapbox on too long of a day. But thank you very much for having me. It's really nice to be with you. I really enjoyed listening to the discussion. I'm sorry I didn't have a lot of the information you wanted, Diana, but I'm happy to get it.
That's all right. I expected Sergio to get it, not you. So, I do have one other hand from somebody who hasn't spoken, and that's Patty Negley. Okay, let her allow her to talk. Patty, go ahead.
Negley.
Patty, you should be able to talk now. We can't hear you if you're saying something. Well, thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the discussion. Appreciate being with you all. It's a great committee. Hang in there, and I'm gonna get a little bit of rest. I'm hoping to be back in council by Friday.
Hope you feel better.
Get better.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Very good. We're gonna move on to our next item, and it's gonna be the Pacific Avenue Beautification Plan and the next steps. And Elise Swanson is gonna fill us in on that.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So as a result of our conversations over the last couple of months regarding Pacific Avenue, we are going to do a Pacific Avenue community walk on Saturday, February 4th at 10 a.m. We're going to meet at Sirens, and it's there will be members of the neighborhood councils, the chamber, and the PBID. And the walk basically is designed to develop to gather data about conditions on Pacific Avenue and to develop plans to seek funding for improvements, be that PBID's funding, chamber funding, grant funding, on how we can address some of the conditions that have been reported out there. Diana and Javier and I met to kind of look at areas we might want to address on the walk. And Diana and Javier, please feel free to interject if I miss anything, but we're looking at anything in the public realm: street amenities, trash containers, sidewalks, trees that need trimming, benches, news racks that are dilapidated or graffitied. We're looking at graffiti in general. There's been a great increase in graffiti in the downtown district. And as a chamber, we're also looking at facades, signage, and empty storefronts. We have had some success in getting facade grants from Wells Fargo in the past. And so something that we want to look at in other grants to help some of our business owners improve facades and signage. We're looking at, the length of Pacific. For us as a chamber, as we move into the connectivity plan with the Port of Los Angeles, we're really interested in Pacific we're interested in all of Pacific, but immediately from 5th to 9th Street. To look at conditions there as Pacific people come down Pacific to come down to the Port of LA into our historic downtown. But we'd love to have volunteers maybe for other blocks along Pacific. And we're excited. And this is a proactive approach. It's data gathering, as I mentioned, to see if those of us that have some funding can combine resources to address some of these issues that are out there. But I'd love any input or volunteers. We'll get a calendar invitation out to the committee. I'll work with Diana and Javier on that, but would love to have you join us on February 4th. But I'll take any questions or input.
We have Greg has a question.
Thanks, Elise, for the update. What time is the walk?
10 a.m. We're going to meet at Sirens, have some coffee. We're going to have clipboards prepared and assign blocks, and we'll head out from Sirens.
Okay. I'm happy to volunteer.
Oh, thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. Any other questions, thoughts, volunteers?
Let's see, we have a couple more. James Campo and then Celia.
Hi, Elise. Thank you
Hi,
for
James.
putting out there. Pacific certainly needs some help, a whole lot of help. On the block that's between 22nd and 21st, the project there on the west side of the street that they're going to scrape the spot, the famous bar. And there are 27 mature palm trees there that I'm trying to get relocated. The developers just brought in a fake arborist, said no, he's just going to bulldoze them. So they are very easily movable, and they're mature and they're worth money. And I think the developer should pay for them to be relocated at wherever you want, Elise. But so I'm working on. I worked with Janice Hahn's office, since Janice got helped get the 27 palms out of the Land Conservancy back in her tenure when she was. They were going to be taken out of San Pedro, and we got those placed on Gaffey Street on Angel Gate Park between Paseo del Mar and 38th Street. There's about 27 palms, and those came from the Land Conservancy that were going to go out to Canoga Park. So she worked with the port. The port paid for a lot of the relocation fee, and I think the port could pay for relocation of these palm trees that are they're on private property,
right?
Between 22nd and 21st. And if you're interested, you have my email, I think. I'm sending. Yeah. So I'm working with Tim's office now since I'm sorry. Her name came. She was working in Janice's office and working on the project for last couple years, and then she got, and now she's with Tim's office now. So.
Erica.
Okay, so that's it.
Okay, thanks, James. I'm not a landscape expert by any means. However, we do have some people that are coming on the walk that have a landscape background, and I will bring this issue up to them.
They want to look at those trees. They're great. I could send you some pictures.
No, I'm very familiar. I see those trees most days on my way to and from work, so very familiar with them. Thank you.
They can be cleaned up really nice.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Let's see, Barbara St. John. You can speak now, Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
Got me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to tell you, Elise, that I would like to volunteer.
Oh, thank you, Barbara.
Saturday.
I'll add you to the calendar notice. Appreciate that. And Barbara, maybe I'd love to have you work with us on those blocks between 5th and 9th to start. We'll eventually get the length of Pacific, but I think those as I mentioned, those key blocks as we look at some of the connectivity issues to get those out
I'd
of the
love
way
to be a
first.
part of it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Barbara.
Celia Gonzalez.
Thank you. I was going to volunteer for past 9th Street going south, because with all the new building that's going to be happening with the projects out there, there's a lot to be desired, and certainly this is no place to. It's not your fault, you know. I just there's a lot of things that could be improved with the anticipated new building. So I'd like to volunteer also, and I'll be down there on meeting day. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Chuck?
Oh, okay. Regarding the palm trees, there's not a lot of fans for palm trees, but I'm one of them that does like palm trees. Anyway, something around 22nd Street, all that development. I mean, the new plans for that area maybe it could be used there.
Okay. Talk about those trees. Thank you, Chuck.
Let's see. I think that's it, Elise.
Okie doke. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, and we look forward to seeing you guys out there. Hopefully as many as you can. So thanks, Elise. Okay. Diana, our next item 5, we were gonna have Sergio
Yeah, and
listen on that.
he's gonna be joining us in a minute, so let's go on and talk about the library. I think you were gonna talk about that, right?
Well, was that on me?
Briefly.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think we all agree that our library needs a lot of help. You know, it's unfortunate that it's been deteriorating, and now it's also creating some safety problems, from what I understand. And Elise can probably fill us in on that a little bit. But you know, the main idea is how we can improve that library, whether it's working with the existing, you know, ideally it would be nice to have a new library. And, you know, it's one of those institutions that when you drive into a city, you see, and it kind of reflects into the city itself. And unfortunately ours is, it's kind of hard to find sometimes, because I drove by it several times before I realized it was a library. The signage is horrible. And it's just, you know, not facing towards the street, so it's very hidden, and I think the facilities themselves could use a lot of improvements and upgrades. So we've been talking about what we could do. We mentioned that there was a group called the Friends of the Library, but we don't know if they're around still.
They are still around.
They are still around.
Celia Moore is still involved with it. They just haven't met much.
I haven't seen them.
I did stop by the library and ask.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so I think, you know, we would like to see something happen, an improvement, not just for looks, functionality of the place, but also the safety of that neighborhood. It kind of invites people to kind of hide behind it, and you know, after hours it just becomes a place that you don't want to be around. So that's not the place you want to send your kids to go spend an afternoon. So there's got to be some way to improve that, and this is just the beginning of that process of thinking. You know, we kind of have to think of it in ways that maybe we could get the council's office to support it, and you know, there's maybe funding that we could get from the city itself that could help on that. Yes, Elise.
I was just thinking, Javier, even I did ask Sergio maybe to check and see where the library is. The library is on a list for improvements. It needs paint. There's potholes in the parking lot. I mean, just general upkeep and maintenance, where we are on the overall list of libraries for improvements while we work on other issues. And then, you know, I'm also wondering, and if we could maybe do something with the bus shelter at 9th and Gaffey, because there's a lot of activity going on between the bus shelter and the library wall with people. There's just a lot of activity going on behind that bus shelter. So those are just some initial thoughts. And maybe we could, you know, I've talked to LAPD about some of the activities that are happening in that area. So they're very aware of it.
Yeah, I think, you know, some of those issues could be solved easily by having like better lighting, light levels, so that there are no areas that people can hide behind. But you know, there's other issues as well. Let's see, we have a question from James Campo.
Yeah, Javier, you touched on the safety issue, and I believe the library is under the protection of 4810 LAMC with the homeless. And not to pick on them, but it's part of the safety, because those guys are victims of drug pushers who come up, and you know, there's not only homeless people sleeping there, but it's the drug pushers that are giving them whatever. And the 7-Eleven adds to the problem across the street, but also homeless people sleeping on across the street and about the 99-cent store on that between 10th and 9th. So that's within all 500 feet. 10th Street is that So I have asked our CRO Melody Shortle, and she, to send some of her team around there, but they need to move on, but they can't just hang out there, and so that is a safety issue. Like you said, do you want your kids coming there? They need to, go by the sidewalk and get into the library. So thank you.
Thanks, James. Barbara and John?
Yeah, I just wanted to just make a couple of statements, I guess. I live right by that library, and I have taken my grandkids there. I honestly think it's really well taken care of inside. I think that the director does a really good job with what they have. But I've also been trying to get a hold of anybody with the Friends of the Library. I've reached out on numerous occasions, and I can't seem to get a hold of anybody, and it's been closed. I would love to try and find out what's going on with the Friends of the Library, honestly. And I don't really know how to get a hold of anyone, because nobody really seemed to have any information. They just said that, the door is usually closed. Also, I had originally, the reason I got involved in the city council is because I really wanted to have a mural painted on the wall right there on that library on 9th Street. And I have already gone to a muralist, Brenda Gonzalez. She's the one who did the painting up on the lighthouse up on 30th Street up there in the coastal area. But she did a wonderful drawing that I would love to see, see something like that done on that wall on 9th Street. There's some amazing things that could be done. There is things that can be done to it to bring it up and bring it some life, and definitely some landscaping for sure. But I have not felt bad, even though there's homeless people around there. I've not had any problems taking my grandchildren in there, and they're, 4 or 5 years old. So just wanted to interject that. Okay.
Thanks, Barbara. Yeah, we've talked about the possibility of a mural and have it lit up at night and become sort of a landmark.
Well, I would love to show the design that I have.
Oh, excellent. Maybe we can talk about it.
Okay.
Let's see, Celia Gonzalez.
Yes, I go there weekly. I have 5 books right now. They all know me there. The safety guard, Kristen, Dave, the director, they all know me. And what's interesting is as somebody else kindly said, it's very well taken care of inside. I've had no problem accessing it from opening till closing. And what's scary is the amount of people that lurk, even though the garden was changed, the planter in front to dissuade people from camping in it. So now there's more prickly plants there. They're not living there. But what they're living in now, though, is the wheelchair ramp, because the wheelchair ramp, and this is genuine, driving by, whether I'm going to the library or not, you see people conducting deals and doing drugs on the ramp because it's solid. It's not open work. So that is a real lure for them. And at dark, that whole front area between the back of the bus stop where they linger and on the entire fence, that wall, and the entire ramp is just, it's become a haven. And it's very interesting to see that they're not locking the chain anymore, so cars can't access it. But going by later in the evening when they're closed, but you can drop off books at the overnight drop, how many police, how often they're parked there in the lot, kind of as a minor dissuasion until they leave, to keep people from lingering around the planters surrounding the parking lot, conducting business and living. Because I've seen a whole bunch of things. I'm sure you're all familiar with it when you drive certain areas. And so they've cleaned up all the brush and bushes. All the beautiful greenery has been cut back because of all the people who are camping out. And it could have better lighting. There's not really a graffiti problem that I've seen, but I agree murals would be a great idea. But that wheelchair ramp, which was such a wonderful thing when it happened, that's become a real haven. That whole place has become a real haven between the darkness behind the enclosed bus waiting area and the wall, and then that. So other than that, the back parking lot, the 2 back parking lots aren't so bad. And the sides, since they cut all the brush back, it's nowhere as bad as it had been, but, you know, people, they can contact each other on their inexpensive cell phones and they meet there. Sometimes it's like a circus going on after hours. So thank you for letting me show you what I know about it, so it could be made better. Thank you.
Thanks, Elia. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, just to let Barbara know, one of my coffee cronies is on the board of directors of the Friends of the Library. So tomorrow morning, I will ask her who's doing what and see if I can get her in touch with you, or Elise, you were there with us this morning. Theo is on their board.
Right,
Friends of the
right.
Library,
And
so.
yeah, I think Barbara, maybe, I don't know, Javier, can we do like a subcommittee of this group? I don't, because
Yeah,
Barbara, I just want to say I'm at the library every week and the librarians are doing a great job. My concern is more the exterior, what's happening. I walked into a drug sale, personally walked right into it without realizing it. I just think, you know, I just want to look at improvements to the exterior and the safety issues, but the librarians are doing a great job.
Yeah.
Well, if there is a subcommittee, I'd like to be a part of it.
Yeah, perhaps that's a better way to at least get it started, and then, you know, we could come up with a motion that we could kind of move forward. That's part of the committee itself.
We could bring it back to this group, maybe if we come up with some ideas. I want to do some research with the main
Elise, maybe we
library.
can talk about this on Saturday. on the 4th.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I'll try and get you in touch with somebody from.
Thank
Friends
you.
of the Library.
Terrific.
They have a lot of money, by the way.
Yeah,
that
you
would
know,
be good.
and
I don't know if they
understand that,
still are,
that should be used, exactly.
but
I
for
love it.
I know that they were paying for like cleanup and stuff around the library because, and by the way, I believe, and if I missed this, sorry, but Rec and Parks had actually been doing the maintenance work and cleanup at the library. I don't know if they still are or how that works, but
Are you gonna be
somehow
on,
Rec and Parks had been doing it. So
are you gonna be on the subcommittee, Doug?
yeah, I'm happy to help out. I mean, you
Well,
know,
let's appoint the committee and then move on.
yeah.
All right. Do we need to appoint it here, Anna?
Hmm?
Do we need to appoint the committee here? Or do we take that motion to create the committee?
Sure. I'll move, we create a committee, the subcommittee on, I don't know if we need to, but a subcommittee on the library. And
Second.
as the starters, at least Barbara St. John, Elise, and Doug.
Okay,
You on it?
I'll be on it.
perfect.
Javier?
Sounds good.
All right. Good.
I'm in.
Very good. Thank you, guys, and
Thanks.
we'll follow up on that.
You're gonna
Let's
have it
see.
as a motion, then Javier, you want a second and vote on it.
Okay, somebody make a
I'll second Linda Alexander.
Linda. Very
Ooh,
good.
Linda, you
Great
could be on the
idea.
committee.
Uh-oh.
We volunteer you.
Thanks.
Okay.
And unlike our normal things, I think we'll just have the people that are here vote.
All in favor, everybody raise your hand, your virtual hands, or any.
Yeah, you can do a no objection and we can.
There you go. No objections. We got it.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
We'll move
It's
on.
almost 8:30, folks.
It's coming up quickly. Let's see. Item 7, Diana, was that something that you want me to talk about? The need for traffic enforcement?
I think we talked to Tim about it. That was I kind of just moved it up and did that unless you thought there was something else we needed to do at this point.
Well, if I could say something quickly about it, I was doing some research on that. There are there's an area that is called high injury network, and 8 segments of our streets are part of that network. Basically, what that is they say it's 6% of the streets in the city, but they comprise they have 65% of the accidents of the whole city in that segment. So that's why they created the Gaffey Street improvement, slow down traffic along that, in some of the initiatives that they took part of that. So my thought that was to follow up with DOT on those things and have them bring some of those mediations that they have as part of that plan to other parts of the city, but it also to add to some of the ones that they already are doing. There's like 4 items that they've taken out of a list of maybe 12 or 15, which could include the traffic signs that tells you what the speed is, just to kind of make it more aware. But also I was thinking to suggest that, they bring in like cameras that could kind of do a little bit of surveillance, which could be for traffic, could be for safety. So I was thinking that, the target would be starting with the Department of Transportation and then taking it to obviously the council's office and the mayor's office, along with the police. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. So we could create a motion from our committee. I know we've talked about it, but it seems like unless we tag it with something, nothing is going to happen. Barbara, do you have a comment?
No, oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Your
sorry.
hand was
No,
up.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, forgot. My bad.
All right. So anyway, that's where I'm at with that, and we will move it to further discussion later. Our next item is Sergeant's still going to be here.
No, he was trying to get on. I don't know what happened. I have a couple things I'll say, and if he's not on, I guess he asked me for the link, and I told him how to find it. And I haven't heard back, so I don't know what's happening. I do have
We'll move on to updates on other items of interest to the committee.
I have just a couple quick ones, and then I think a couple other people may have one. The draft cruise terminal RFP, the actual draft of the RFP is out for for comment. They're doing an RFP both for the inner harbor and the outer harbor cruise terminals. I had thought originally it was just for the outer harbor one. And after the comment period, then they're going to finalize it, then they will issue the actual RFP for operators for those terminals. There's an amended PAIP that's going to the Board of Harbor Commissioners. It was presented to the board in December. It allocates a fair amount of funds with no additional public input. Our Northwest Port Committee is preparing a letter. They're going to be looking at it tomorrow. A comment letter, particularly because there has been no input on, and there seems to be no recognition that of any of the input that we previously gave to the PAIP ourselves and the chamber. And they've got a revised plan that takes out all the references to public input into the process. Deleted those references. So as I say, our port committee is going to be looking at it, and other neighborhood councils may want to look at it. So did Javier, do you want to talk about last night? About the connectivity plan?
Yeah, I mean, we had an opportunity to meet with the consultants for the connectivity plan, and this is just the first step of a series of public engagements that they're going to do, and they kind of gave us a timeline for what they're trying to achieve, but there will be public meetings that will be scheduled for the whole community at large, and we will find out locations and times of those as they come up. But it was more of a like an initial step to see what the general consensus is, and we kind of had a feeling as to what they're looking at as well. Look well qualified from some of the presentation of their previous project. And I think, you know, they're going to hear from different groups, and each particular group is going to have their own particular interests. So I think it's important that, you know, everybody gets out there and talks to them, and then give your input as much as you would like to. So, you know, we will be following this up, and I'm sure you will find out. We'll probably announce it on our websites that when those meetings will happen, and we'll let you know about them.
Well, there were two dates that they gave us. The general public input session was on February the 17th.
That's right.
16th.
16th.
Yes, Thursday.
Are those in stone yet, though? Were they still investigating, or are they going to actually announce those dates?
Yeah, I think they were pretty set on the date.
I thought they were set on the date. They were just making sure there was no major conflict. So I'm sorry, the 16th, because it's Thursday. I was
16.
16. I was trying to get my calendar up, didn't do it.
Yeah, and I guess the location is not clear yet, but the time is.
Right, so we suggested the Boys and Girls Club. And then they're going to do something on the first Thursday in March. So those will be the public input sessions. And then long about May, then they will have a plan to actually look at and give input into. They said they were really looking at 4 elements: transportation, bicycle or motorized transportation, bicycle and pedestrians, public art, and open space. So it was kind of an interesting, it was just sort of a preview of the exercises they plan to do in the public workshop. It was kind of interesting, kind of fun, and I would certainly urge everyone to go and participate.
Yeah, I would say that this morning as I was driving down Harbor Boulevard, I kept looking in the rearview mirror to make sure I wasn't unraveling orange yarn behind me. So,
For those that you weren't there was a exercise with yarn that we.
It was a lot of fun, I'll say that.
We had to knit some sweaters, so.
Very interesting.
Thanks, Frank.
I just, I didn't want to comment. I wanted just some information and some updates. Can I ask now?
Yeah.
Okay, I want a Croatian Cultural Center. What's the latest news in that?
That's
So Frank, the council, Tim McCosker and staff met with General Services and gave them the green light to go ahead and begin negotiations with the chamber on taking over the management of the building. We're waiting to get a meeting date from General Services and also understand what the terms might be. We had a commercial building inspector go out and take a look at the building. It's in pretty good shape. But the issue is as you all know, that the copper plumbing was ripped out by people that came through the roof. So there was extensive damage and we've got to replace the plumbing. So we need to get an estimate on that replacement and to see who's going to be responsible for that. But we are proceeding. But I think it's probably going to be a 6-month process, I think, by the time we get this all wrapped up. But we're moving ahead.
Thank you. And my one other, several others, the Walker's Cafe. What's the latest news in Walker's Cafe? Any news there?
You know, they had made an interest in coming to this committee, and I followed up with them a couple times, and they kept saying they weren't ready yet, and they were kind of rethinking and reworking. And that's the last I have heard. It's probably been a month though since I followed up with them.
Okay, last thing, the Starkist building on Terminal Island. Any late news on that, on Starkist building on Terminal Island? No, nothing. And I noticed next month we're going to be dealing with the courthouse.
Yeah.
Can you provide any preliminary now? Like, doesn't look like anything's happening there.
Right. They went back and have made some changes. They rethought some of it and have some changes that they're going to be showing us this next month. Part of it is a food court on the ground floor. They were not able to get a grocery store interested. And so they've come up with an alternative idea. There's a couple of external changes. I don't remember what all they are, but they're going to present the revised plans to us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Frank.
You're welcome.
Diana, are they in plan check?
I believe so.
Okay.
I mean, they've got their entitlements, so.
Okay. James Compo, you had a question.
Diana, you talked about the inner cruise terminal and the outer cruise terminal. Was anything discussing when those cruise ships will actually plug in? And my understanding is they'll never have to, as long as there's flexible membrane buildings there considered temporary, so that therefore they'll never have to have any plug-in facilities. However, the one cruise ship parked at the structural cruise terminal, the regular building, the ships are parked there spewing out black diesel all weekend long when they're parked in there. So I didn't know if anything addressed about plug-in shore power. Thank you.
That would be something that would be under our port committee, so I haven't looked at that.
Thank you.
Anything else, Diana? Or anybody else? If not, we're gonna move on to
Jason, did you have an update you wanted to give?
Jason.
An update?
You had something you had said you might want to talk about.
Oh, well, I thought you
It's a
said,
public comment.
I thought you said we couldn't have any discussion about it, so.
Can't discuss it, but you could present it.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was just wanted to highlight this expiration of the NEMS2 solar net metering, which is ending on April 14th, which right now you can get in, like LADWP will pay you 100% of the electrical value when you spin the meter backwards as you put electricity into the grid. And the California Board of Power, I forget the acronym, which is mostly for profit, electrical companies, has decided to change that from 100% to 25%. So it's a huge cutback in the amount of in the incentive, really, to put solar panels on your building, because the payback is much less. Also, this could inhibit some of the companies out there that are sort of doing creative financing, where they're taking a cut of that payback money to pay for the panels to put it on buildings. So this has the potential to really stifle the growth of solar in California. Their argument is that this should motivate people to put battery systems in their house, right? So rather than spinning the meter, charging batteries. Well, that's all fine and good, but batteries are really expensive, right? Sometimes as much as the cost of the panels themselves. And this will put it well out of the reach for, non-wealthy solar installers. This really will hurt adoption in poorer communities. So it's just a terrible idea. So I wanted to, entertain the idea of putting a letter together and trying to get this, elevated to whoever could help us get our message out, how we disapprove of this, if the committees do disapprove of this change. So.
Thanks, Jason. Maybe you can bring it up to one of the next meetings.
Yeah, Jason, maybe you could write something up that we can send out to people.
Okay. Yeah, just because it's time sensitive, right? April 14th will be happening pretty soon.
So maybe you could send out, and people as individuals can do something, even if we don't have time to do something as committees, but maybe committees do too. So maybe you can write it up and tell people what needs to be done. Oh, I just got another message.
Okay. Okay, so
Sergio's here. Sergio's here.
Oh, he is.
Just as we're about to end the meeting, Sergio.
Let's see, let's see. I just promote Sergio.
There he is.
Oh, there you are. Can you hear us?
Yeah, talking to me? Yes, I can.
Oh, hi, Sergio.
I mean, it went very long because your boss was here.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we had a lot of questions.
But do you have any updates for us?
Yeah, so first of all, let me apologize. Today, as you know, we're counting the homeless people in throughout the harbor area. And so I was helping setting up with that as well. And I lost track of time. I thought it was 8 o'clock and I guess it's 8:30. So I apologize. I found this on the web. Oh, sorry, that's my Siri talking. So I have a couple of updates. I know that the council member was on. I don't know what he addressed. So Diana, it might be easier for you just to ask me and I'll answer.
Well, he addressed the issue of the billboards,
Okay.
but none of the other things that I asked to see if you could look into. So I don't know what you actually found or were able to research.
So I don't have my notes in front of me because like I said, I was out. What again? I know you were talking about several of the projects that you sent me. Is that correct?
Yeah, the boutique hotel. Trying to remember, 'cause I had the list up when I was talking to him.
Yeah. So no, I don't have, as I mentioned, I wouldn't have all those answers today. But we do have the answer on the EIFD that you wanted to chat about. But I saw Elise on. Did she address that?
No, we're waiting for you.
Okay, so the city received a grant from the Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG, to study the possibility of creating what we call an EIFD. It's an increment financing district. And what it is, it's basically like, I don't know, let me back up a little bit. When we had a CRA, when they were in existence, CRAs operated this way. They would take the tax increment. So you had a base level of taxes. So let's say you pay, I'm gonna just make a number up for simplistic purposes, $1,000 in taxes on your property. But the tax value goes up. And so next year you're paying $1,003 in taxes. That $3 above the baseline is what we call a tax increment. And under CRA, that money would stay with the redevelopment project and be reinvested in the community. We're trying to create something similar. That would we create a tax increment district, in that we would create this district, and any tax increment from the baseline of that district would be used to reinvest in infrastructure and other potential projects that the EIFD would identify. So for example, let's say the group, when it's all said and done, identifies infrastructure or building repairing of sidewalks and streets and trees. If that is the intent of the EIFD, then we would use tax increments to fund that. People hear the word tax and tax increments and think that we're going to raise people's taxes. And that's absolutely not the case. What it is any tax that you're paying because your value of property went up. In addition, that's beyond the baseline, that money, instead of going to the county budget and never to be seen by us again, would instead be deposited into a fund for us to use here in San Pedro. And so we are in the beginning stages of this project. We are making initial presentations. We will have a process more in line as to what that would be, what that would look like in the very near future. We're still looking at the boundaries of this district to determine what kind of revenue we would be able to raise. And so it is a wonderful funding opportunity that we can use towards providing infrastructure programs in the area. Again, very initial. I know that they're making presentations right now on the concept of what an EIFD will look like, but our particular EIFD still needs to be worked out. And so I'm actually having a presentation on the item in about 2 weeks, like on the 13th or something like that. And I'm going to invite neighborhood council leadership to participate in a subsequent meeting, just so you can understand what it's like, what it is, not to be scared about it. At the end of the day, the average the taxpayer, won't notice the difference. But the difference you would see is the investment in our community. And so that's just a wonderful opportunity for us to do some of the projects that we want to be seeing in our community.
And I think one of the things that the consultants that are working on this have asked for is identification of specific projects that would be priorities for the community. And so I think, you know, as we talk about things like the library, as we walk down Pacific Avenue, as we think about our community, we should begin to think about what might be some of our priorities so that at a subsequent meeting, maybe we can have a discussion on that.
That is correct. At the end of the day, a 5-member board is created. This 5-member board will determine what those priorities are. But the board includes the council member, it includes the mayor. And so obviously hearing from the community as we develop those priorities will be very important. Because I mean, the makeup of that board, I'm sure they'll be listening to ideas and suggestions that the community may have.
Elise, you had a comment on that?
I do have a comment. So I know the consultants have been doing a lot of outreach. They had a pop-up at First Thursday. We have a great set of slides. Sergio, I'll share them with you. Diana, I thought you had them, where they've been meeting with community groups since June of 2022 and taking input on potential projects to be funded. I know affordable housing was at the top of the list, facade improvement, support for nonprofits. There were about 4 things that rose to the top of the list, and they lay out all the groups they've met with. So Sergio, I'll get you those slides. I know that the help that the consultant asked for is that the motion is sitting in committee right now in LA City. And I know, Sergio, you're going to have a presentation, but I think it's the Economic Development Committee. And so they're waiting to have that heard at Economic Development, but they've done a lot of outreach on this project. So I'm going to, do you want me to send you the slides to get out to everybody?
Yeah, I think that's great. We did have an earlier presentation, 6 months ago, maybe very early on in the process. As they were beginning that process. Yeah, the top 4 priorities were the affordable housing, small businesses, streets and sidewalk improvement, and parking were the top 4 that had come up so far. But they were saying now that they want us to be more specific and to look at.
Yeah, they were refining the concepts. But Sergio, they said they need to get that out of committee and moving forward to meet the SCAG timeline. So
and that motion is in the agenda packet for tonight. The motion.
That's correct. That's correct. And at least I did not mean to imply that none of the work has been done. I meant to say that the formal plan is now begins to get written.
Correct. Yeah.
That's what I meant by that. Yeah. I know that they've been working hard and they've presented to your chamber and others.
Yeah. And their pop-up was great. Yeah. Their pop-up at First Thursday was great.
Yeah. But they are now beginning the formal write-up of the place. That's correct.
So it's just another thing we may want to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Very good. Anything else, Diana, that we should ask Sergio? Okay. Well, thank you for being here, Sergio.
Thank you. And I'm going to excuse myself to go count the unhoused in our community. And so I will be out there, say a prayer for those of us who are out there working, make sure we all stay safe. And hopefully we'll get a good count of the accurate number of folks that are unhoused in our community.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that too. Okay, we are going to our last item, public comment on items not on the agenda. And I don't see any hands up, so I will adjourn the meeting and thanks everyone.
See you on Saturday the 4th?
Yes. We'll see you there. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Right, Javier.
Good night.
Bye.